For most of our lifetimes, it had been known the Yankees ruled New York City. But in the 80s, perception was different. The Yankees did not make the playoffs from 1981 through 1995 exclusive, so really 82 to 93, because in 94 there was a strike, while the Mets won the World Series in 1986 and made it back to the playoffs in 1988. So there's a time where the Mets were better than the Yankees. However, that since changed. 1992 was the last time the Yankees had a losing record. Made the playoffs every year from 95 to 2007 and have won 4 titles during that. Of course, they cheated, so you can put asterisks next to all of those, but still. During that time, the Mets made the playoffs twice. 1999, NLCS was where they lost, and then they lost the Chosen World Series head-to-head against the Yankees. And then after 2006, when they lost in the NLCS, the Mets would not make the playoffs for 9 years, suffering multiple historic collapses along the way. So, the Mets kind of stunk for a while. However, times changed. You see the Yankees struggle in the mid-2010s. As in 2013 and 2016 inclusive, they made the playoffs one time and it was a wild card loss. The Mets, meanwhile, made the World Series and they made the playoffs next year. But then, we have 5 years of the Yankees making the playoffs and the Mets not. When they do both make it, the Mets flop early on and the Yankees make the ALCS. 2023, they're both bad. The Yankees suffer their worst year since 1992, but the Mets also completely implode and suffer their worst year since 2017 and have 7 fewer wins. However, here comes 2024. And this is where I get into the meat and toast of why I think that the Mets are starting to run New York City. The Mets started off 0-5. The Yankees started off 5-0. However, they both went 89 and 68 in their final 157 games, which is even more impressive when you realize the Yankees won 41 of their first 60 games. Mets only 25 of their first 60 games, and yet the Mets only finished 5 games behind them. That's actually pretty incredible that they turned it around that much. The Yankees struggled heavily in the second half, while the Mets took off, found a playoff spot, lost it, and then gained it back. The Mets became one of the most clutch teams in the MLB for a while, and the Yankees were losing it. Now, the Yankees did end up winning the division, thanks to a collapse by the Orioles. They did get the 1 seed, thanks to a collapse by the Guardians. But even though 94 wins in the 1 seed and they won the AL pennant, everyone knew that it was probably the most fraudulent run to the World Series, and the Yankees got promptly exposed. Mets, meanwhile, they had to fight to get in. They were 4 games out on August 29th and 28th. One of those 2 days, 20-9 in their final 29 games, just to tie for a spot that they wound up winning on tiebreaker. I'm being dead serious. They had to go 20-9. They had to win over 2/3 of their remaining games just to get into the playoffs. They went on an amazing 9-game winning streak to go from being 4 games out to tying everyone up for the final wild card spot in just a week and a half. I mean, it was incredible. Yes, they did lose 3 series down the stretch. However, their ability to sweep opponents and win a crucial 4-game series just really helped them down the stretch. And even though the Mets didn't make it quite as far as the Yankees, they did not go quietly into the night either. As they made a crucial comeback in Game 3 of the Wild Card Series, and then beat the Phillies in 4 games in the National League Division Series. They both lost to the Dodgers. Yankees obviously lost closer to the Dodgers, but the Mets took them to more games. And, you know, they both embarrassed themselves heavily. But they both became contenders in New York. Meanwhile, you look at the Subway Series this year, and the Mets won all 4 games that they played. And yes, Yankees fans will yap about how some of their worst players are getting starts for that game. My response is, except in one of them, that does not matter. Yankees star pitcher Garrett Cole allowed 6 earned runs to the Mets both times. One of the games, the Mets won 9-7. Probably would have been closer had Edwin Diaz not been, wouldn't have been that close. I mean, if Edwin Diaz wasn't suspended and they had to use some of their weakest bullpen arms in that game. The other game, 12-3. And the Mets won another game in the Subway Series, 12-2. The only game that was close was when the Mets won 3-2 in the 3rd game of the series. That was the only one that was close. I will give them that. If they had had their best lineup, they probably would have taken that game. However, they still would have lost 3 out of 4. It wasn't just that the Yankees lost. They got blown out in most of them. And, well, you know. Now, as for all that, you know, that certainly sounds lovely, but you can't say a team owns another team based on one regular season series. Because you can say, Andrew, wait, the Rays swept the Mets. Does that mean that the Rays are better than the Mets? Well, my other argument is that in order to get to the Dodgers, the Mets played tougher competition. They went up against the Milwaukee Brewers and almost lost that series. Like, the Brewers played them close. Then they went up against a seemingly better opponent in the Philadelphia Phillies, who sort of played only 500 ball down the stretch, and it had to beat the Phillies. The Yankees played the Royals, a team who only made it to the playoffs because they had a 12-1 record against a 41-121 team in the White Sox, and also the Guardians, who, again, were just not that good. Like, the White Sox made the rest of the AL Central look good and competent, but they weren't good. Teams that could have taken down the Yankees, the Houston Astros, the Baltimore Orioles. Honestly, the Detroit Tigers probably could have won a series. Yankees did not have to face any of them. The Mets had to face some of the best competition in the National League. I mean, they didn't have to face the Padres. Probably would have lost to the Pods too, but they had to go up against tough teams, and they beat tough teams. So this was not like a situation where the Mets had a cupcake schedule too. Like, they didn't. And just being in that position, you know, the National League East is obviously a more stacked division than the American League East. We have better teams in the National League East. So the Mets had a harder time. If the Mets were in the Yankees' position, like, I don't know. And if the Mets played the Yankees in the World Series, I think the Mets would have won in 6. Obviously, it didn't happen, though. But the Yankees didn't win either. And then the Mets just took a lot of players from the Yankees. Now, obviously, in most cases, Yankees fans don't care. You know, Luis Severino, who wound up going to the Athletics, is an example of a player that we got who was good in the Yankees for a while, regressed, and then played decent for the Mets. But not good enough for the Mets to give him the kind of money that he wanted. By the way, what I think makes the Severino signing with the A's even dumber is that he does this not because he wants the money, but because he thinks that he can turn the Athletics into a championship contending team. Like, lol. But, going back to what I said about that, they took Severino from them, Harrison Bader. They made Luis Torrens decent for a while. You know, I mean, I guess he was only in the Yankees minor league organization. And I get that he crumbled down the stretch. But for a while, Luis Torrens was amazing. And he still probably is a quality backup to Alvarez. But he will admit, not a great catcher. And then, take Clay Holmes, which I didn't agree with. But again, the Mets just took a lot of players from the Yankees. They took Carlos Mendoza from the Yankees. And then came Soto. I just want to say this as a Mets fan. The fact that the Mets and Yankees offered comparable amounts of money to Juan Soto, and he chose the Mets, tells you everything you need to know. The Yankees have lost their touch. It is beautiful. The Mets are now running New York City. People who weren't sure what side to choose, who would always choose the Yankees, they're now starting to choose the Mets. It's incredible how much the tide has turned. Yankees fans initially never really cared about the Mets because they always dominated them. And it's like, why look on your little brother? Now, they're filled with envy and hate. It's clear now something has changed. And again, Yankees offered 16 years, $760 million. Mets offered 15 years, $765 million. It was not just that Juan Soto was chasing money. He wanted to be on a team that he thought had a brighter future. And that would be the Mets. Yankees, so Judge flops every October. Had to get carried by Stanton, who's really old by now. A lot of players are aging, and they don't have a lot of young guys on their team anymore. Well, that's for the Mets. Lindor's in his prime. They might still keep Pete Alonso, I'm not sure. Even though he's regressing. And you have all this young talent. Mark Vientos already had a breakout. Luis Angel Acuna probably going to have a breakout at some point soon. You know, they have all this budding talent. Alvarez might get a lot better if he recovers from his injury. They have all this talent. And this really puts the Mets in a better position to contend, in my opinion. And that's why I think that the Mets are going to rule New York City with Soto. Obviously, pitching, the Mets do need some pitching. You know, Clay Holmes, Paul Blackburn, Tyler McGill. Nobody's scared of those guys. I guess David Peterson, if he plays at 2024 level, could be someone decent for the Mets. And I feel like, you know, some of the other options aren't terrible, but it's not they have a great pitching rotation. However, this can be changed. The Mets can re-sign Sean Manaea. The Mets could also, in addition to signing Sean Manaea, they could get Burns or Fried, although I am personally strongly against getting Corbin Burns for the Mets. There could be other guys in the free market that the Mets could acquire as well. And they still have Kodai Senga, who obviously was injured, so he's unreliable, but who knows what he could be in terms of pitching. Like, could he save the Mets? Basically, Obviously, for the Mets, it's too early to tell this will work out for 2025 or not, especially because they need pitching. They definitely need pitching. But the Mets are still in a decent position to contend going forward, a better position than the Yankees. And therefore, Yankees have lost their touch.